in for a couple of minutes, and if no one shows up, we can always reschedule or something.
We're live.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, guys. So sorry, we're brand new to Facebook Live, so it was quite the experience. Thank you to Christy for showing us there was another tool that we could use. So I'm using StreamYard right now, so I'm brand new. We're going to discover how it works. If you see this, guys, could you leave us a comment so that we know we are live and that we did something right? Because I'm not sure right now. So yeah, if you see this, please leave us a comment underneath, so we know we're okay. We did something right. So I'm gonna go on our Facebook page and see if we are live right now, because that would be a good way for us to know. I see a live sign next to videos, so we should be good. Let's see. Let's see. Yes, I see the two of us. Aha! I see the two of us, and it says test, which is what I had. Let me turn it on to see. So I'm gonna go on our Facebook page and we're good. Okay, we're good. Can you hear an echo, or is there an echo on your end?
There was, but I'm just muting my microphone, so we can mute our microphones when we're not speaking.
How do you mute your microphone? Oh, here. Okay, good. So do you want to start, David, or do you want me to go ahead?
I can start. I mean, ultimately, the reason that we've decided to do this show, so we've got a poetry show that we've just started called Poetry Really Matters, and we decided to come up with this concept because we wanted to have a monthly themed show where we could discuss how people could submit better to us at the journal, along with sharing some great examples of successful people that have already submitted to us. We were going to use our first issue as the examples from the first issue to give people an idea of the kind of stuff that we're looking for the journal. And we also wanted to share some inspirational poetry that we have enjoyed, so that inspires us to write our own inspirational poetry, and really kind of take questions from people if they have out there that have any kind of questions about submitting to journals, and if they have any questions specifically for us. And we wanted to kind of focus on, or at least kind of go into more depth as to our own rules and regulations when it comes to submitting. We try to be friendly and open and available as possible, but we do have our criteria that we need people to follow if they want to be successful when they submit their poetry to us. So that's the kind of agenda, really. It's really to go through those kind of areas, and then maybe in future episodes we'll take themes, suggestions from people that join the chat or want to actually kind of ask us directly questions, or leave us comments about our processes. And that's really what we're going to sort of focus on, I think, today. So ultimately, I can begin, if you like, Cendrine, with a couple of poems that I've really enjoyed reading. I've got a wonderful collection of poetry that I dug out from my collection. It's called Good Poems for Hard Times. They're selected and introduced by Garrison Keelio. Let's show that to the chat. That's quite an interesting volume because it's got a lot of very inspirational people in the particular volume I'm looking at. I found that it's difficult to find pure collections of inspirational poetry. There are some out there, but a lot of them are classical types poets of very sort of long ago. We're talking about people in the 1800s and those kind of sort of 1900 kind of eras. So I selected a couple of poems here that I thought were good to use as examples for the kind of thing that we might want to see at Auroras and Blossoms. One that caught my eye was that Mary Oliver has just passed away. It was a little while ago, but it was still fairly recent, like in the last few months. So I wanted to read one of her poems and let you all know, how good she was. And her poetry is very, very inspirational and very, very pretty, about a lot of it about nature and stuff. So I thought I'd read Spring by Mary Oliver. So this is Spring by Mary Oliver. Somewhere a black bear has just risen from sleep and is staring. down the mountain all night in the brisk and shallow restlessness of early spring. I think of her, her full black fists, flicking the gravel, her tongue, like a red fire touching the grass, the cold water. There is only one question: how to love this world. I think of her rising like a black and leafy ledge, to sharpen her claws against the silence of the trees, whatever else. My life, with its poems and its music and its glass cities, it is also this dazzling darkness coming down the mountain, breathing and tasting. All day I think of her, her white teeth, her wordlessness, her perfect love. So I thought that was a sweet poem by Mary. As I say, a lot of her ones tend to focus on nature, but also they're very, very kind of inspirational. They're very kind of soul-searching, and she uses simple language as well, which is what we're looking for in our entries too. The other poem that I wanted to look at today was, see if I can find it. I've lost the page that it was on now. Here we are. It was a song by W.H. Auden. So I really like this one as well, actually. So I stumbled across this one. The chimney sweepers wash their faces and forget to wash the neck. The lighthouse keepers let the lamps go out and leave the ships to wreck. The prosperous baker leaves the rolls in hundreds in the oven to burn. The undertaker pins a small note on the coffin saying, "Wait till I return, I've got a date with love." And deep-sea divers cut their boots off and come bubbling to the top. And engine drivers bring expresses in the tunnel to a stop. The village rector dashes down the side aisle halfway through a psalm. The sanitary inspector runs off with the cover of the cesspool on his arm to keep his date with love. So that's another little one that I thought had very kind of simple language, wasn't too flowery or over the top. And they're quite short as well. So, we do appreciate longer forms of poetry. But to be honest, if you want to sort of keep things short and sweet, then we can fit more of them in the journal and feature more people as well. So that's why I wanted to feature those two particular poems. And I'd like to make this kind of a regular sort of thing for the show as well. This is our pilot debut episode. And I just wanted to share those, but there will be other ones that I will be bringing up, probably from other collections that I have, or if I come across people that have got kind of real kind of focused inspirational collections that we can share with you all here. So Cendrine, if you want to give a reading of some of the ones that we've had in our debut issue of our journal we issued in October, just to let people know some of the ones that we've accepted for that particular issue.
What I would like to do is actually whet some people's appetites. Instead of reading the whole piece of the poems that I've really enjoyed, I would like to just read a few passages from those poems, because I think when I read a poem, it really has to hit me hard for it to have an impact on me. So I'm just going to read a small part of each piece that I have selected from the piece that we featured in the journal, because I think those parts speak to the positivity that we are really looking for in the poems that we feature in the magazine. So the first passage that I chose for today comes from Kinsukuoroi by Sandra Hurst. We are at our most loving when we most want to hate, when our beast cries out for vengeance and we deny it. Broken, crushed, vengeful, all this we are. Despite it all, we fly. So that was the first part. Another poem that I really, really enjoyed is The Importance of Dirt by Sushant Sunday. And I really like this part when she says, I purposely forgot to water the flowers out front, but the sky measured the perfect amount of rain. This part really hit me hard emotionally, and for me it has multi-layered meaning. So it's really interesting how the simplicity of the words can bring so much emotion into a poem. Antoinette Dixon is also one of my favorite poets. She's a friend of mine too, and she has this way of writing with simple words, and yet she hits you with a message. So crow's feet and smile lines. So this part, years pass, and in the time lapse, we find reasons anew to love as we do. So I really like that too. What else did I choose? Let me see. There was another part that I really enjoyed. Treasured Smiles by J.D. Estrada, that we both really enjoy. This poet, really, really good poet too. Just be you, just be true, and enjoy the view. You know, it's so simple and yet so nice. And the last part I would like to quote is The Answer is Redefinition by Christy Stratos. Practice doesn't make perfect, but it helps us refine what makes us happy and how to achieve it. And that is more than any they or it can provide. And that's it for my selection.
Well, they're all really wonderful, those ones there. And also, we find that when we're using the tasters that we've given you there, it's an incentive to actually purchase the issue itself. So you get to experience the full poem, and you can enjoy the poem even more than the little tasters that we've kind of dished out to you today. So there is a copy that Cendrine's holding up now of our debut issue. We are actually working on issue 2 at the moment, and submissions for that will expire on the 15th, I believe, of December this year. And we're getting a lot of submissions in, so we think we're going to be having quite a few regular issues coming up for 2020. So if you don't make it into the submission pile for December for issue 2, then you're guaranteed to have a chance to get into another issue soon next year. Because, as I say, we've had such an overwhelming response that we anticipate having at least 4 issues next year, and we might even have to increase the frequency of those issues depending on the number of submissions that we get. So I would encourage you to keep submitting and try to follow our rules that we put down as well, because we don't like to be too stiffy when it comes to or difficult when it comes to rules, but we have had to put some criteria in there. A lot of people that have been submitting to us are failing to grasp the concept of the inspirational nature of our magazine. We really want to look for pieces that give us something that's positive or uplifting. If the poem is a rant or is just very negative and doesn't resolve in a kind of positive or uplifting way, or gives people a message, a clear message of kind of uplifting nature at the end of it, then unfortunately it could be a situation where we might have to ask you to either submit again. But to be frank, if you're submitting one poem to us, we allow 1 free poem per period. And if it isn't of an inspirational nature and doesn't, we're also steering away from erotica and politics. So we've had a couple of submissions that do kind of fall into that criteria. And we're a family-friendly magazine, so we don't want that kind of sort of stuff. It's very, very difficult, very easy to take sides when it comes to politics and to bring a negative attitude towards things. So that's why we're having to make it a kind of ban on the type of submissions that we get, if it directly involves those kind of things. So no erotica, no dirty words or swearing. We just want real kind of genuine, positive, uplifting experiences that we can share. I think you have to look, if you're going to use something that's based on your own experiences or your own life experience, that there's got to be some kind of positive thing there. It could have been something that was generated from a negative experience. You could have had some upset or grief in your life, but if it's taught you a lesson that's then allowed you to look at life in a different way, in a more positive aspect, then that is something that I believe you should put into a poem and share with us. Because we've had a lot of well-written entries when it comes to poetry. With some really good entries, but we can't accept them because they're just too negative, or they're too they're sort of like motivational poems where it might be someone raging against the system or the machine, or even men or women or other kind of sort of situations if it's a feminist type poem. And those can be very, very passionate, well-written poems, but if they don't have a clear inspirational message, and just full of negativity, then they're not going to make it into the magazine. So that's really what we're trying to drive at when we say that's what we're looking for our submission criteria. And I still don't think we've had anybody drop into the chat at the moment, but this will obviously change for the next episode. I do still keep seeing it come up on Facebook Live, I think, as well. So it's still linked to there.
It will be available after the show, so if people missed it, it's okay. We've had technical issues. That's the first show. It's okay. When it comes to submissions, really, you have to remember one thing. How do I want to be seen by others? That's really the question you have to ask yourself when you submit, whether it is to us or it is to another poetry journal. It's very important when you submit your poetry journal to do your work, to do your due diligence, and most importantly, to take your work seriously, because if you don't take your work seriously, it will show when you submit your poem. So my pieces of advice are really work as if you were submitting to a journalist, because it's basically the same process. So how do you reach a journalist in the best way? You make his or her work easier, and this is the same for the editors. The editors are people who are knowledgeable about their field. So based on the magazine, they know exactly what they're looking for, they know exactly what they want, and based on their experience as well, they're able to tell right away if the submission will be good or not based on your pitch. And I can tell you, because I was a journalist for a few years. I was an art critic. I've interviewed hundreds of independent artists. I work with independent artists a lot. So I knew from the pitch and the way a person introduced themselves, if they would be, despite the talent, they may be the most talented person in the world, but if they do not know how to promote themselves, if they do it in a bad way, then for me, I don't have time to do any research to look and see, is that person good or not? It doesn't matter. I don't have time. So make my life easier. So that's really, whether it's our journal or another journal, do your work, make the editor's life easier, and read the guidelines. Most people, because they see a submission page, they're just gonna read every second line and just say, oh, it's free, oh, I'm gonna pay, so I know if I submit, the editors are going to accept my submission. This is not the way it works, because when someone tells you to pay, you're paying for the time the person is taking to read your submission. You're paying for the experience of that person, and as well, you're helping finance the journal and the magazine. So you're not just paying for the privilege of being in the journal. You're paying to help the journal, to help the team behind the journal create a product that is enjoyable and a quality product for everyone. So that's why there's a reading fee. You're not just paying out of the blue just for any reason, because editors do a lot of work behind the scenes. So that's why there's a paying fee, or whether it's paying or it's free, it doesn't matter. You just have to remember that there are people working in the background, spending a lot of time reading your submission. So you're not guaranteed, because you're going to pay or submit in general, you're not guaranteed to be accepted. So that one thing. So read the guidelines very carefully, sometimes twice, 3 times, 4 times if need be. And most importantly, build a relationship, which means if you're not too sure about the guidelines, go to the Facebook page of the journal, go to the Twitter page, ask questions, participate in the comment section. Do not feel uncomfortable asking questions. Show that you want to participate. A lot of artists take a lot and they do not give in return. So build a relationship, be personable. You do not have to become a friend with the editors. It's not the way it is, but be personable. So one thing that I've noticed that I really enjoy personally when I receive a message is when the poet who submits, and I don't know it, David may say otherwise, but I'm sure he will agree with me. Personalize your pitch, for example. When you submit to us to another journal, take the time to find the name of the editor or the names of the editors and use it. And I've noticed that a lot of the submissions we've received come with our names attached to them. So dear Cendrine, dear David, here is my submission, which is really, really nice, instead of dear editors, because we're human beings, so we like to be treated as such. And for me, I have a name that you might not have seen before, because I'm originally from France. So I know when someone has done their homework, because they've spelled my name properly, and I know they've taken the time to look for the information on the website. So present yourself professionally, use our name, and show that you know the magazine. So for example, at the end of our submission form, there is anything else we should know. So usually the poets who are selected, it doesn't really factor into it, but it adds to the way you present yourself. So in that part, the winning poets usually have added something. I saw you in an interview, and I agree with you on the fact that positivity is very important. That's why I submitted to you, because I agree with that. So add something to show that you know the magazine. You don't have to spend 3 hours on the magazine and looking at the website, but just spend the time to look around the website. And basically every little thing that you add to your submission will make a difference. The way you present your submission, use our names, personalize the pitch, and most importantly, be confident in yourself. Remember, whether you are selected or rejected doesn't matter, because when an editor, whether it is us or another editor from another journal, we're not judging your talent, we're judging how the submission, the poem you send us, fits into the criteria of the journal. So if you're rejected, do not take it personally, because, for example, we will take the time to explain to you why the poem doesn't fit. And if you have introduced yourself in a good way, and if you've done the work, we are very fair. If we feel that there's good potential, there is a likelihood that we will ask you to resubmit something. But that's because we feel that you have respected us, you've respected our time, and you've taken the time to present yourself in a way that tells us, yes, there is potential here. It didn't work for this piece, but we know there's something out there that we want to see. So we see it. And honestly, David and I have submitted to tons of poetry journals, and I see the pattern here. If you treat an editor right, with respect, you respect their time, there's a high likelihood that this person will respect you in return. And I've found some editors that asked me to resubmit a poem because they thought, yeah, the poem is okay, but maybe you would like to submit something else. And that's a chance you have to take. And that's our way to show how grateful we are for how much you respect our time. That's basically what it is. And I'm done.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a couple of other sort of issues that we've had. We have a submission form that we allow also for children as well, but they have to submit via their parents and guardians. But what we're finding with the submission form is that some people aren't attaching their poetry. They aren't sending their poetry separately. We don't allow the submission of the poetry submission through the submission form, because you might have formatted it in a certain way that won't allow the web browser to accept your formatting choices. So what we tend to do is we ask for your information through the submission form, and then we clearly mention that you should send over to us a document, either a Word document or a PDF, containing your poem on a separate email. And we've had some people that are just emailing us directly and ignoring the form. We've had some people that are sending us their submission form but not sending us their poem. So ultimately, they need to, again, it's all about reading. I think you've got to really read carefully what we put in the criteria. And, that's one of the key things, is to say, look, it's a separate process. We've had to do it that way so that we can receive your poem in the format that you want it to be displayed. Because otherwise, if it's just shoved into a submission form, then it might be a certain kind of structure that you've put in there, or a certain way that you've written it that won't come across in that sort of respect. So that's one of the sort of things that I wanted to bring up. And I hope we still see more of that, of people following the instructions more clearly. There are a lot of buttons on the sheet in relation to paying fees, but you don't have to interact with those if you are just going down the free submission route, which is one free submission per submission period. So as I said, we're taking submissions for issue 2 at the moment, and you are allowed to submit one poem without needing to interact with those payment buttons. But if you want to submit more than one poem at a time, and you want us to engage with us in order to read your poetry, that's why we're saying for more than one poem, then we want the reading fee to justify our time, and to give us the time to go through each individual poem that you send to us. We've had something come from Christy. She's saying what you said about respect totally makes sense, and part of that is definitely really reading the instructions for submission carefully. The same submission guidelines don't apply to all journals. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, because of the specialization or the nature that we specialize in with our particular journal, we do have our own submission criteria. So it's a great statement that Chris has sort of brought up there. A lot of journals do have their own kind of individual rules. I would say that some of them are quite vague. We've tried to be very more specific. I think Cendrine's done an excellent job of being extremely specific with our guidelines, because a lot of journals just say they don't give you a theme. They just say send your poem in, and it can be on anything at all. And I find that with that kind of level of vagueness, it can be very difficult to think, what should I send? So they then try and say, well, why not read the journal to see what type of pieces we accept? And then if you try and say, okay, well, I'll read the journal and I'll buy a copy of the journal, it's usually a ploy so that you start looking at the poems and thinking, well, if they're on any kind of subject matter and any kind of style and any kind of poetry form, then it doesn't really give me the guidance I need to take the things forward. So I would always say, always scrutinize any kind of guidelines that you've got, and be wary of the ones that are very kind of sort of basic and vague, that just say they allow anything. Because I would much rather submit to journals that give me something specific, like I want a horror piece, or I want a crime related piece, or I want, if we're talking about short stories, or if we're talking about poetry, I want something that is specifically, about this particular subject. It could be they want something about nature or flowers or something like that. And to be honest, if you submit something that isn't about nature or flowers, and then you try to write an excuse about how it relates to it, you can't try something like that on. We've had a couple of submissions where people have said they think the poem is inspirational for this reason, when it isn't. And we're not fools. We can read the message of the poem, and we can understand the underlying messages of the poem, and think, well, if that doesn't kind of come across as uplifting to us, or a positive motivational experience to us, then it doesn't matter how you try to present it. We will say, right, well, you haven't read our criteria properly. And that's why we're very specific. We've even given a kind of list of number guidelines on our submission rules, just to really kind of say you should check these things off before you even think of submitting to us, because, as I say, a lot of other places they will have their submission criteria, but they won't sort of say what could actually prevent the submission from being bounced by the editors. So I feel that's why we're unique, I think, in our journal. That we try to kind of give people guidance up front, so we're not wasting their time, and they're not wasting our time when they do submit to us. So I don't know if you have any extra comments to add, Cendrine?
Well, I think the main issue we've had is that many people do not understand the meaning of the word positive, and this I think, to me, speaks to how negative this society has become. So negative that many people do not understand what they're told. There's actually positive in this world, and you can actually show it through poetry. This is really, really interesting. So one other thing I would say, whether we chose not to have a specific theme for now, because we want to open the door and to give as many people as possible a way to express themselves and to be featured in the magazine. But we might have themes in the future, because when we allow teenagers to submit poetry, if you're between the ages of 13 and 16 years old, we have another submission page that you can use to submit poetry. Because we want this magazine to be family friendly, we want everyone to be able to read the poetry and say, well, of course, they don't have to like everything. That's the way it is, to each their own. But what is really important to remember is when you submit to a magazine, also look at the age groups they are targeting. This is very important. For example, for us, we tell you it's a family-friendly magazine, which means that we want you to be extremely careful about the message you want to share with the world in our magazine. So things like talking about ecstasy, taking drugs, and stuff like that, we're going to say no. Do not complain if we say no. We want this to be a family-friendly magazine. So we are aware we don't live in a bubble that kids are exposed to so many negative things via the TV or the movies and so on and so forth, even music. But it doesn't mean we want to participate in this status quo. So be really careful about that. Ask yourself the question, what kind of message do I want to share with the world through the magazine? That's very important. So not only do we look at the message, but we also look at the words that are used in the poems. So your poem may be fantastic, maybe awesome, but if there is a word that we consider as, like they're kids and kids are going to read this, we're not going to accept the poem. Let's be clear about this. And I mean, you can talk about any topic you want. And, for example, if you want to talk about suicide or cancer, you can, because this is something that is part of our world. It exists, so we cannot be shy about it. We have to talk about it. But if you want to broach a topic like this, make sure that there is a lesson to learn for the readers, so that even if it's teenagers, because between the age of 13 and 16, they're old enough to start talking about those topics, because it may happen in some families. Your poem should allow a conversation so that the kid can talk about that to their parents, for example, because the parents will probably read the magazine as well. And it can start a conversation, a very positive conversation with the parents as well. So that's what we're basically trying to achieve as well. That's why make sure that there is a story that people can learn, something positive. Because despite the sadness of a suicide, for example, what did you learn from that experience? That's mostly what we want you to focus on as well.
Yeah, that's totally the case, because I think it's the perspective you have to take in relation to the subject matter. You could have someone that's, say, a cancer survivor, and it might be that because they've survived cancer, that's taught them to put their life into a new kind of sort of level of perspective when it comes to perhaps their creativity or how they view life going forward. They're grateful to still be on the planet. Another thing is that someone could have lost someone to someone, and they might have gone through so they might have lost someone to a disease or illness, and then they've gone through a horrible kind of pain and suffering time. But then they say that if they come out of it, then maybe they're having a positive discussion, maybe they're communicating with their deceased loved one in a positive kind of sort of way, saying that they're looking over them. There's different kind of ways to look at situations and say, yes, these are negative things that we're going to experience in our lives. But beautiful poetry can be written about those negative experiences, but if there isn't a way to channel that and turn that into a positive experience, then that's the difficulty we sort of all face, I think, and that's what we're looking for with our journal. We want to be able to say these things are out there in the world, but if you approach these things with a kind of positive outlook, that these things are going to happen to you, but you can find a way to move on and to learn a lesson in your life that might actually encourage you to be more sort of motivated or focused on your life. Perhaps you were drifting until something happened to a loved one, and then that caused you to be more focused and think, okay, I'm going to do something with my life now. And that's a very good example of how a story can develop from that experience and then be put into a poem itself and become inspiration for a poem and become an inspirational poem. We've got another comment from Christy that I wanted to just bring up. It says there can be definitely be negative experiences that change your life for the positive in the end. And a lot of times you want to get that message out there for other people to learn too. So yes, you do. We want people to empathise with other people's plights, that we're all in this together. You don't have to feel like it's an isolated incident to yourself, or that you feel lonely because you're looking for other people to relate to. There are a lot of other people that are going through similar situations. And that doesn't kind of diminish your own situation. It just means that you're not alone in your suffering, and by sharing the situations, or at least by finding positivity in the situations, it can be cathartic and help you get over a particular situation that you might have, a particular sad situation that you might have encountered. Oh, we got another guest in the chat as well. I notice we've got Amber here as well. So hi, Amber.
Hello, Amber. Hello, Christy. Thank you for your lovely comments.
I'm just going to say, Amber, if you've got any questions for us in relation to the journal, I don't know whether you are interested in submitting any poetry to us, or if you just want to generally ask us a question about our journal as a person that might be a reader of poetry rather than a writer of poetry, then by all means, either give us put something in the comments, and we'll try to answer it for you. This is a pilot show that we're doing. We had technical issues earlier on. We tried broadcasting direct to Facebook, so we're on StreamYard now, thanks to Christy's help. But yeah, so it's a bit rough around the edges for this first episode, but I believe we've got a lot of kind of information out there about what we're looking for in our journal, what the journal is all about, the kind of inspirational poems that me and Cendrine like and would like to see for the journal, and also just try and share some of our own inspirations ourselves that we believe in, because me and Cendrine have both written many books each between us of inspirational poetry. And we feel like we're kind of like pioneers in our field, because, as I mentioned earlier on in the stream, that I don't feel like there's a huge amount of inspirational poetry books that purely focus on inspirational poetry. Now, there are a lot of poets that have kind of individual poems that they've written that are inspirational, but I don't think there are some people that dedicate their life to inspirational poetry. But you look through the bestseller categories on Amazon, for example, and a lot of people are it's all classical poetry rather than more contemporary poetry, because I think people like to go down the misery route, and misery sort of sells. We can all relate to that. We all have sad experiences in our lives, but we want to try and put positive spin on everything that we do, really. So just seeing if there's any other sort of comments or any other people in the chat at the moment. I think it's just Amber and Christy. Oh no, we've got LA Filament as well. Hello.
I see some poets that we've featured, and one poet that might be in the next issue. We won't say who it is.
We won't say. We'll just say it's under consideration at the moment.
No, but we're very technical issues happen. That's the way it is, and now, thanks to Christy, we know a good tool now that we can use to do the streaming. So yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section. The video will be available for you to watch later when we're done today, so you can leave your comments and your questions, and we will actually use questions and comments for ideas for the next shows. So feel free to send us anything, and we'll use that spotter for the next shows. That'd be a good idea. So if you have any specific questions, it's not just about the magazine in general, but about poetry, anything about poetry, feel free to ask. We'll be more than happy to answer in the next show. So I think we're done for now, despite the technical difficulties. But you see, we've been almost 40 minutes, so time flies. So we want to thank you very much for bearing with us despite the technical difficulties. It was a great show. I was really happy to be here with David, as always, my partner in crime. And the shows will continue every second or third Saturday of the month. So we have another show planned for next month. Send us your questions, your comments, and we'll use that for ideas for the next shows. And that's about it. Thank you very much for attending. We'll do better next time. And David, it's up to you if you have something else to say.
Yes, I just wanted to say, if anybody in the chat or anybody that watches the video wants to go back to the start to see the poems that I read out of two people that I admire in relation to poets, but also if you want to share your own inspirational poets or poems that really move you, we'd like to hear that, because we can always use them as examples for future submissions. We're probably going to have a different theme for the next show when we do the one again, which will be closer to Christmas now, but we won't have it right next to Christmas because everybody will be busy. So it'll probably be a week or so before Christmas. But yeah, so if you want to share with us your inspirational kind of sort of pieces in terms of which poets or which poems inspire you on a daily basis, then by all means let us know, or even think about submitting some poetry to us at our journal as well. So we'd love to hear from you.
So you have a great night, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for your time.